At a recent House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing, North Korea Defector Ambassador Tae Young-ho testified about the strategic value of both disseminating information into North Korea and the protection of North Korean refugees in China. Drawing on an analogy about the fall of the Berlin Wall, Ambassador Tae claimed that there may be a similar result if China stopped repatriations of refugees in the United States and the international community, expanded soft power news and information flows into North Korea. It was very dramatic in his testimony and couldn't be clearer just what a game changer it would be if the refugees could find a place of refuge in China, and then on to other places like South Korea and other places where freedom flourishes. Drawing on this hearing will explore the current situation facing North Korean asylum seekers and assess both China's obligation to protect, a legal obligation to protect refugees, and the effectiveness of global efforts to stop what the UN Commission on Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea called crimes against humanity experienced by refugees. As the Congress continues to look at ways to best apply maximum diplomatic and financial pressure on the regime of Kim Jong-un, this hearing will explore the strategic relevance of further pressing the Chinese government to protect North Korean refugees and evaluate the impact of surging outside information into North Korea will have. Amid escalating tensions on the Korean Peninsula, we cannot forget those suffering under the North Korean regime and those North Korean refugees who are in China. North Korean asylum seekers are at imminent risk of repatriation, torture, sexual violence, forced abortions, hard labor, and even execution. China's repatriations of the North Koreans is a stark violation of both the spirit and the letter of the Refugee Convention and the 1967 protocol to which China has acceded. The Chinese government has a lot to answer for. It is no wonder that the UN Commission on Inquiry for North Korea Human Rights concluded that the government of the People's Republic of China is aiding and abetting in crimes against humanity by forcibly repatriating North Korean refugees. I would note that as many as 90% of North Korean women, refugees in China, today fall prey to traffickers who will sell the refugees into sexual slavery or forced marriages. Suzanne Schulte, who will testify during this hearing, previously brought women in who were refugees from North Korea, Mrs. Ma and others, who for the first time told the story about how they were exploited inside of China and forced into sex trafficking. It was just horrific testimony, but an eye-opener about how they went from a exploitation in North Korea into exploitation into China. Labor trafficking is also pervasive. The government of North Korea and the government and businesses in China, Russia, and elsewhere in the world profit from the trafficking of North Korean laborers. In recent months, Chinese authorities reportedly deported hundreds of South Korean missionaries and NGO workers who have provided crucial help to the North Korean refugees in China. So the people providing that assistance have been ousted as well. The international community, especially the United Nations, the Trump administration, and the U.S. Congress, must insist that China honor its treaty obligations and end its egregious practice of systematic repatriation of North Korean refugees. I would note parenthetically, I have raised this repeatedly with now the Secretary General, but the former head of the UNHCR, and never got a good answer. So the UN really needs to step up to the plate here. Chinese officials and businesses complicit in repatriation of North Korean refugees, or those who profit from labor trafficking, should also be held accountable. The Congress has given the administration the sanction tools that, if used, would send the right message and especially hold people to account, whether it be through the North Korean Sanctions Enforcement Act, the Global Magnitsky Act, or those sanctions attached to China's Tier 3 designation for trafficking in persons. All should be used strategically and swiftly to send a clear message. For too long, the world has tolerated China's failures to protect refugees and those complicit in repatriations of refugees who profit from the trafficking of North Koreans should be held accountable. The ending of repatriation should be a bellwether for judging China's willingness to curtail Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions. In addition to the protection of North Korean refugees, this hearing will also assess global efforts to surge news and information into North Korea. Expansion of existing efforts to disseminate information into North Korea is especially important, for nothing else than to tarnish and undermine the Kim family cult of personality, where they are lifted up as gods. The Kim family cult must be taken seriously as a national security threat and a barometer of Kim Jong-un's power. The cult of personality, sometimes called Juche, has inspired devotion from the North Korean people because of the cradle-to-grave propaganda that they endure. We must undermine the Kim family cult and the big lies upon which it's based, and the propaganda that grants Kim Jong-un almost godlike status. This status has allowed 3 generations of the Kim family to starve and abuse the North Korean people and divert scarce resources to the military and to their nuclear programs. We must have an information surge into North Korea. Human rights groups are smuggling DVDs and USB sticks with video about the Kim family's sins into North Korea right now. Balloons are launched across the border with promises of a better life in South Korea. Radio programs broadcast daily messages and news urging North Korea's elite to defect and turn against Kim Jong-un. We know some of these efforts are having an effect. We saw several high-level defections of diplomats, military officers, and the families of North Korea's elites in the last year alone. The number of asylum seekers, depressed for several years by upgraded security efforts in China, have begun to rise. Efforts to get information into North Korea must be expanded dramatically, and Washington should be leading this effort, working primarily with North Korean defector groups in South Korea and other human rights organizations. The North Korean defector group should be front and center in this effort. They know North Korea, and they know the minds of the people. They know what information is needed to permanently tarnish the Kim family cult and what will motivate military leaders to defect. Today's hearing takes place among growing tensions on the Korean peninsula. We must seek all available options to deal with and resolve the issues at hand. I now yield to my good friend and colleague, Ms. Bass, for any comments she might have.